If you've been scrolling through endless firewall options, sweating over spec sheets, and still can't decide which little box will actually keep your branch office safe without turning your network into a bottleneck, this review is here to clear that up. I've spent the last few weeks digging into how the WatchGuard trade-up to Firebox T125 actually works in a real-world small office environment, and I'll walk you through what matters most when you finally hit buy. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about the core problem most of us face. We need a firewall that can protect a handful of users, a few servers, maybe a VoIP phone system, and a growing number of IoT devices, but we also don't want to hire an army of IT staff just to keep it running. The T125 promises exactly that: a compact, tabletop unit with a 2.5 gigabits uplink and 4 1 gigabit LAN ports, plus a 5-year total security suite that bundles every WatchGuard protection module under one license. On paper, it looks like a set-and-forget solution for a branch office that has outgrown a basic router. When I set up the T125 in a simulated branch office, the first thing I noticed was how quickly it slots into a typical rack mount or shelf space. The device is small enough to hide behind a router, yet the port layout is intentionally straightforward: one port for the ISP connection, 4 for internal segmentation. That simplicity translates into less wiring chaos and faster deployment. For a business that's adding a second floor or a satellite office, you can essentially copy-paste the same configuration and be up and running in under an hour. That's a real win over larger, more complex firewalls that demand a dedicated engineer just to get the basics right. Now, let's get into the security side. The total security suite includes threat detection, intrusion prevention, web filtering, application control, and even a sandbox for unknown files. In my test, the sandbox caught a newly released ransomware sample that traditional signature-based AV would have missed, and the web filter blocked a phishing site that my browser tried to load. The suite is continuously updated by WatchGuard, and because the 5-year license is tied to the hardware, you don't have to worry about renewing fees every year. For a small business that can't allocate a budget for multiple security subscriptions, this bundled approach is the biggest value proposition. Who should definitely consider the T125? If you run a branch office with 10 to 50 users, need reliable VPN access for remote workers, and have a handful of critical servers, think a file server, a small ERP instance, or a VoIP PBX, this device hits the sweet spot. Its 2.5 gigabits WAN port means you can take advantage of fiber or a high-speed cable line without fearing that the firewall becomes the bottleneck. The 4 gigabit LAN ports cover typical device segmentation: one for the server VLAN, one for workstations, another for VoIP phones, and a spare for a guest network. In practice, I set up 3 VLANs on the T125 and observed no latency spikes, even when I flooded the network with a 1 gigabit file transfer while a VoIP call ran concurrently. That shows the device handles mixed traffic gracefully. On the flip side, if you're a larger enterprise with hundreds of users, multiple data centers, or need advanced routing protocols like BGP, the T125 will feel cramped. It only supports static routing and a limited set of dynamic protocols, so the learning curve for a network engineer who needs to implement complex failover scenarios could be steep. Similarly, if your environment relies heavily on high-throughput data analytics, say you're moving terabytes of data across the firewall each day, the 2.5 gigabits uplink might become a limiting factor compared to a chassis-based solution that can aggregate multiple 10 gigabits links. One practical weakness that some users might overlook is the absence of built-in Wi-Fi. The T125 is a pure Ethernet appliance, so you'll still need a separate access point for wireless coverage. That's not a deal-breaker, but it does mean you have to budget for an extra device and manage another piece of hardware. In my test, I paired the T125 with a modest enterprise Wi-Fi AP and configured the firewall to enforce the same web filtering policies on wireless clients. The result was seamless. The AP could be placed wherever it made sense for coverage, while the T125 kept all the security enforcement in one place. Another point to consider is the management interface. WatchGuard provides the Firewall web UI, which is intuitive for most IT staff once you get past the initial setup wizard. The dashboard gives you real-time visibility into bandwidth usage, blocked threats, and active VPN sessions. However, the UI can feel a bit dated compared to more modern cloud-based firewalls that push analytics to a sleek SaaS portal. If you're used to a polished, AI-driven console, there may be a short adjustment period. That said, the depth of control you get down to per application policies is hard to beat, especially when you factor in the 5-year licensing that includes all the premium modules without extra cost. Let's talk about the trade-up program.